Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this week for our weekly news update. And I'm grateful for every one of you that join us here on YouTube, Rumble, or Facebook. Thank you so much for sharing the link and appreciate you all being here as we go over these headlines. There's a lot going on. There's a lot happening. Thank you for the five by five. I appreciate that, and we've got a lot to cover. So thank you again for those of you that are sharing the link. Continue to see good numbers on the weekly news broadcast. So we're thankful for those of you that are joining us for that. And if you are joining us for the first time, we do have a website that we share all of our stories on. We keep them all here on remnantwatch.com. It gives us an easy place for us to keep track of things that we're going to be talking about from week to week. So if you ever miss a broadcast, you certainly can come back here. And this top banner always has the link to the latest broadcast. And again, I want to encourage those of you who are not subscribed to subscribe. Double check that you are, because there have been some, funny business in that regard. So just making sure. And again, if you are not paying attention to these things that are going on in the world, then there are many people that have told me that they've disconnected completely from the news. This is a very dangerous thing to do. We are commanded by the scripture to watch, therefore. And then there's those that are overstimulated and, of course, getting way too many updates and staying way too connected to these things. And that is where you get the anxiety and that overwhelmedness. So one of the things we like to say around here is we like to be informed without being overwhelmed, because fear has torment and our adversary wants us to walk in fear. So since we knew these things were coming in accordance with scriptural prophecy, we are not caught by surprise. We are aware of what's going on. And with that, let's get into the news. And tonight's top story, Ukraine is blowing up things in Russia, and it is getting dicey. I do believe this is probably the last gasp, if you will, or an attempt to try to make this war continue to be relevant. It is quite theatrical. So the imagery that's coming out of this is hard to watch, and the headlines, of course, are equally graphic. Ukraine is blowing up Russian gas rigs in Black Sea and killing 40 soldiers and wiping out the recon HQ in a massive explosion. And so Ukraine is, of course, getting help from NATO, which is, of course, their intention to expand this conflict. It would seem to any observer with keen eyes and a wise, discerning, nose for the truth, that they're trying to cover something else up. My suspicion is the economic meltdown that is going on all around us. But Ukraine has dealt Vladimir Putin another huge blow after blasting a Russian rig in the Black Sea, killing 40 soldiers. So not a small feat, not a small attack. And of course, this continues to be a theater of operations that they're using to draw major powers into war. And again, you got to remember that there are those who benefit greatly from warfare. We still can't figure out what benefit we gain from dropping a bomb, but apparently there are folks that derive some benefit from that. Again, still can't figure that out. And Ukraine is, in fact, advancing aggressively, having been resupplied by NATO. They are advancing aggressively into Russia. Dramatic video shows Ukraine's jets, which they recently received, and troops storm into Russia as panicked Putin fears key nuclear plant could be seized. And so dramatic videos show Ukrainian jets and troops storming into Russia as Vladimir Putin fears a key nuclear plant could be exposed. And so this was quite an offensive. There was a lot of damage done, and they're definitely not over. They're not done fighting over there for that territory, and they're certainly doing exactly what he was afraid of. There was, in fact, an attack that had the nuclear power plant on fire. So now you have additional factors that are kicking in. This is one of the things that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. One of the reasons why I believe Russia has not deployed certain weapons to its east because of the way the wind blows, and the prevailing wind would bring those the very fallout of those weapons right into Russia. So that gives Ukraine an advantage in that regard. And so I do think that they were trying to do everything they could to avoid a nuclear situation, and unfortunately it looks like that's what they exactly have. And we have saber rattling coming from our own Pentagon here in the West. They are refusing to rule out strikes on Moscow in a shocking exchange on Ukraine's incursion into Kursk. So the Pentagon on Thursday was asked by a reporter during the daily briefing whether Ukraine's forces use of American weapons on its ongoing incursion is consistent with U.S. policy of what Ukraine can and cannot do with U.S. weapons. And it has become clear that Ukrainian troops are currently using American weapons to attack Russian territory, troops, civilian, and infrastructure. And so basically they said, yeah, it's consistent with our policy. If you guys remember, not just a few months ago, this very issue came up, and they were backwalking some of the authorizations and what they were not authorizing this weaponry to be used for. And of course, that was while they were trying to get it passed. That was when they were trying to get it through Congress. And so, they said what they had to say. And now we're seeing, the real tune, which we all knew. And this is why this is going to continue to have the results it is, because you cannot build with nothing but lies when your credibility is literally in the toilet internationally, as this administration appears to be. It makes it very difficult to carry a narrative. Credibility is incredibly important for carrying any narrative, and they've lost that in this hour. So, and for those of you that are paying attention to the broader conflict that, of course, is just in that same region, of course, that Iran is, they're saber rattling now between Iran and Israel. And again, folks, this comes at a fortuitous time when they're going to have to try to figure out how to cover massive losses in an economic system that is doomed to fail, doomed from the day they started. One of the things we learned from the Torah is that there can be no usury charged. When you charge usury, you not only enslave the people that you're using that usury over, but you design a system that's doomed to fail eventually. Mathematically, it will collapse on its own weight. It always has to. And so here we're seeing what Robert Kiyosaki, the writer of the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is calling the end of an empire. And I happen to agree with him. So we're watching the collapse as prophesied in the book of Daniel. They have tried to make the statue, and if you remember, the feet were clay and stone, if you will, or clay and so there was a mix there, clay and metal, and of course indicating the transhumanism that we see manifesting today. So we're seeing serious polarity in the world, and this is why you're seeing such strong pushback coming from other countries that are no longer afraid to oppose the hegemony that had been running the world for so long. In fact, now you're seeing these types of headlines where China is openly supporting Iran in defending security. Why is this critical? Well, again, the scripture talks about a 200-man army coming across the Euphrates River that's been dried up. And the only country that can field such an army would be China. And already expressing its will in the Middle East. And here, China is supporting Iran in defending security, the foreign minister says. So Wang Yi repeated Beijing's denunciation of the assassination of Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, saying the strike had violated Iran's sovereignty. And of course, that is a critical point, because again, if they begin to allow this, then they can violate Taiwan's sovereignty and other nations' sovereignty. And every nation's sovereignty becomes free game. And so China is actually on the right side of this issue. China supports Iran in defending its sovereignty, security, and national dignity. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi told Iran's acting foreign minister in a phone call on Sunday, according to a statement by China's foreign ministry. In the phone call, Wang repeated Beijing's denunciation of the assassination of Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran on July 31st, saying the strike had violated Iran's sovereignty. And it does threaten regional stability. So, of course, whenever you just decide you're just going to bomb, well, there's people that are going to have a response to that. And we don't take sides in these issues, but we do wonder, again, what problems does a bomb solve? We keep asking this question and we haven't gotten a good answer yet. And yet they continue to arm up. The only ones that seem to be benefiting from this addiction to hype that continues to manifest are the people selling the weapons. So, they're having a brisk year. Iran to deliver hundreds of ballistic missiles to Russia. So we already saw the tie with Iran and China in the previous story, and now we see its connection with Russia. So again, if you thought those ties were light, well, you're seeing just how integrated these countries are becoming. When they have a common enemy, it drives them together. Okay? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So that is a common tactic. Dozens of Russian military personnel are being trained in Iran to use the FATH 360 close range ballistic missile system, two European intelligence sources told Reuters, adding that they expected the imminent delivery of hundreds of the satellite-guided weapons to Russia for its war in Ukraine. So you're seeing the swapping of equipment depending upon the kind of warfare that they're dealing with. This is going to continue. I do believe that there was a big, giant meeting somewhere where they decided to put on these theatrics so they could talk countries into spending huge money on weapons, even going into debt, needing, of course, bankers in order to do that, needing, of course, weapons manufacturers in order to do that, and, of course, to defend the sovereignty of a nation and so forth. So, once again, the same list of characters seem to be the beneficiaries of this addiction to hype that seems to be filling the world at the moment. And again, we do battle with the prince of the power of the air. So that's the atmosphere being created, an atmosphere of fear, of conflict, and of course, yes, absolutely. Without a currency, then there wouldn't be these big giant. How could you do these deals, right? You need a currency. So whoever's managing that currency not only benefits from that transaction, but the activation of all their remaining currency as well, because it's being used. So they have many, many reasons why they benefit from the use. And that is exactly what we were warned about in the scripture. For it is the love of mammon that is the root of all evil. And we continue to see more and more headlines. Again, we watch narratives, folks. And so when they're saying these things openly, we can't ignore them. This came out this past Shabbat. World War III fears explode as Russian allies rush troops to Ukraine's border after provocation. Russia's ally, Belarus, is claimed to have shot down several aerial targets that crossed its border from Ukraine and said it would move troops to defend. So there are attempts. There are those that want a broader conflict. And again, the more conflict, hey, the more bullets they sell, right? So again, there are people that definitely want to see increased conflict. But it's more than that. This is what was prophesied in the scripture, that peace would be taken from the earth. So is it coincidental? Do we just have a plausible reason? Nevertheless, the scripture is being fulfilled before our very eyes. And again, the very thing that Vladimir Putin was concerned about and even publicly decried is exactly what's starting to happen. Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant engulfed in flames, with Russia accused of blackmail. And basically, they lit the place on fire. And so the Russia-controlled nuclear power plant in Ukraine is billowing black smoke even as we speak. So again, This was not something Russia wanted. They were very clear about that. And now, of course, they have the fallout of this nuclear disaster, a Chernobyl level disaster that's now just erupted. I mean, adding to every other type of fallout that they must be having, from heavy metals to all forms of fumes, debris, um, contaminations to the soil, contaminations to the air. And I can't imagine what's coming down in the rain. Can you guys, I mean, your comments are appreciated. You're all sharp people. You know what's coming down in the rain if they take rainwater and analyze it. It's got to be atrocious, right? And then on top of that, to make matters worse, you're going to make sure you have a nuclear meltdown just in case you missed anything. It's almost like if we can't have it, we're ruining it for everybody else sort of attitude I'm seeing here. This is very nasty and is counterproductive to any, I mean, no one nation builds when you've destroyed all the soil and you've destroyed the farm capability, you've destroyed everything. Where's the benefit to that? And of course, who gets the fallout? Well, again, as the weather pattern tends to move, from the west to the east, right? You're going to see that fallout go right into Russia. And again, they're much bolder now in their attacks. Crippling blow. Ukraine kills up to 400 troops in Russia as Hamar strike wipes out column in devastating attack in Putin's doorstep. Shocking footage shows the charged wreckage of Russian vehicles and dozens of dead bodies by a roadside. So that's got to be rough to see. We won't be putting it all on there, but thankfully those are rough, blanked out. But bodies can be seen piled on the road and inside the burnt-out trucks after they were blasted in a huge HIMARS missile strike. Around 14 vehicles loaded with weapons and ammunition were struck in the blast. The wreckage of the convoy stretches well over 100 feet down the road. So this is far from over conflict. And again, once they're fueled with any kind of money, even a small group can continue a war, if you will, a guerrilla war for a long, long time. And they certainly were well funded. So this could be the way that this goes, where it's just strikes and explosions happening randomly and things being sabotaged. We may be in for that for a while now, as this conflict continues. And again, that was the only way that how does this wind down? How does this whole conflict wind down? It's probably not going to wind down nicely. And so even while one side may be considerably defeated, whatever forces are left are going to use whatever they're not going to go out diplomatically. So this is going to continue to be an ugly scene for all of us to see. And as the scripture said, only with your eyes will you see the recompense of the wicked. And speaking of some serious repercussions of war, again, Israeli airstrike on a Gaza school. I don't understand this. I honestly do not understand this. If you have enough intel to know that the terrorists are there, then don't you have enough intel to send in a strategic, like SWAT team or whatever, right? So it just seems like the answer is just blow the whole building up. Used as a shelter, it kills at least 80 Palestinian officials say. I don't understand this. Again, not taking sides. I just don't get this strategy. An Israeli airstrike hit a school turned shelter in Gaza early Saturday, killing at least 80 people and wounding nearly 50 others, Palestinian health authorities said, in one of the deadliest attacks in the 10-month Israel-Hamas war. A witness said it struck during prayers at a mosque in the building. It was the latest of what the UN Human Rights Office called systematic attacks on schools by Israel, with at least 21 since July 4th, leaving hundreds dead, including women and children. I don't know how you justify this. I'm not, again, taking sides in this. I don't think anybody has clean hands, but I honestly don't know how you justify this, especially more than once. And They're saying it's been 21 times since July 4th. That does seem, I could see why someone would say that's systematic. I think that lends credibility to that assessment. And so it does seem a very sad and very dark day for children. The innocent victims of all these conflicts are always the children. And yes, I do believe it is more blood sacrifices. And it doesn't look like they're done. Israel's on high alert for potential major Iranian attack within days. Well, they certainly provoked enough for that. Israel is bracing for a potential major Iranian attack within days, according to multiple reports on Sunday evening, although the Israeli military has downplayed the situation by stating that civilian instructions remain unchanged for now. And again, I'm not certain that there aren't certain forces that don't want heavy civilian casualties. They're always scrambling for what they believe is the high ground, and they want to be the victim so that they could claim victim mentality or victimhood, and therefore have the high ground to do whatever they want to do to their enemy. So it's a very interesting game of posturing that we continue to see in the Middle East. And of course, the U.S. is directly, now they're not just supplying weapons, the U.S. is directly beefing up its posture in the Middle East. So all nations are gathering together here. And it warns an Iran-based attack on Israel could come this week. So they're concerned about this attack. They're talking about it now. They're telegraphing a whole lot. Whenever they telegraph this much, you and I both know they're seeding a narrative. Just like when they told us a couple of months ago that we were going to have a very, very busy hurricane season. Remember that, guys? U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has ordered a guided missile submarine to the Middle East and is telling the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike group to sail more quickly to the area, as the U.S. on Monday said it believes Iran or its proxies may launch a strike against Israel as soon as this week. The move, announced by the Defense Department Sunday, comes as the U.S. and other allies push for Israel and Hamas to achieve a ceasefire agreement. Yeah, because they got to move on to the next fight. This Hamas one's giving them bad press. This one's not giving them the high ground the way they want. They want to shut this one down and move on to one where they can maybe have high ground. Okay. And this is what we continue to see. And part of the reason why I believe this warfare is going on is because whenever we've seen anything attack or threaten the supremacy of the hegemony, the financial hegemony, we've always seen war. Anybody that's paid attention to that anthropologically has always noticed that there's war. Just coincidentally, whenever any country or any group of countries try to break free from the hegemonic powers that had global control of the economic system. And so now we're seeing something we've been tracking for over a year now. We've been watching the BRICS nations coming together. And of course, that is just gaining more and more strength and more speed as de-dollarization, the path to global financial freedom, is the way that they're talking. This is coming out of Asia Times, folks. This is how they're talking on the other side. So just so you catch the opposite narrative a little bit, so you can see how they're thinking, what's on their minds, what headlines they're reading, okay? And they're reading, wow, we're finally going to get free. We're going to get our path to global financial freedom by getting rid of the dollar. Are you seeing this? The U.S. weaponization of dollar is backfiring as BRICS and wider developing world accelerate away from dollar-based trade and holdings, because now that they see how they use the dollar to punish people, that was all the motivation they needed to put these countries together. Now you're seeing the effect. The economic and financial sanctions often backfire. The most notable example is the weaponization of the dollar against Russia. The measure has sparked a global movement to de-dollarize, the opposite of the punitive move's strategic intention. So it was meant to do something completely different, and it totally backfired. And now, did you guys hear the latest? Well, I heard a rumor, can't qualify this, but the rumor that I heard was that the unit that is going to be coming out from the BRICS, one unit, like so $1 of their BRICS unit, their BRICS dollar, is worth 55 US dollars. That's the rumor. So, and that's supposed to be coming as early as this fall and possibly in the spring of 2025. So somewhere in that theater, we're going to see this implementation. So if they're valuing that at that level, 1 to 55, that means the absolute decimation of the U.S. economy that continues to depend on the fiat currency of the Federal Reserve. And so unless someone comes in, maybe that is the plan politically, to come in with a brand new currency or a new way to exchange, because it looks to me, to this observer, as that system that had been going for 50 years, the petrodollar, is come to its end. Its demise is quite apparent. And in fact, we're seeing more and more actual on the ground, real live results that you can't get away from. There's a retail apocalypse going on in the United States, and it's gaining momentum all over America. And there's stores that are closing everywhere. Retailers are closing thousands of stores. And if the U.S.'s economy is in such good shape, why is that the case? Of course, the reality is that that's not the case. And we're seeing a continued increase year after year of more stores that are closing. And so this is a trend that is continuing. And despite any flowery words of, oh, everything is fine. And you know how, they always try to tell you that everything is fine. When they tell you everything is fine, that's when you run. Right? When they tell you everything is good, that's when you run. So we're looking at the real reality. I bet you that if you ask some of the employees of these branches, they would tell you the economy is really not doing so great at all. Major U.S. banks are, again, continuing to close branches. So we've been watching this, and the way that they do this is little by little so as to not cause the panic that we all know would be created if they had fired all these people at once. So they did it in a systematic way. Major U.S. banks, including Wells Fargo, closed 33 branches in just 2 weeks. National banks closed more than 30 branches in just 2 weeks last month. Chase Bank of America, PNC, and other national banks collectively closed 33 locations between July 14th and July 28th. That is a brisk pace, my friends. Okay? They are closing down operations because they have no further need for that mechanism. And any of you who have been involved in digital or cryptocurrencies know the speed and simplicity of transactions that can be afforded using those mechanisms. So it really makes the previous system a bit obsolete. And so they know that it's only a matter of time before the average guy, or more of the sort of average people, I mean, just as it starts to come down, can you imagine if BRICS makes available an account where the average guy, any global citizen, any person can open that account and trade on the BRICS network and store value there? Can you imagine what that would do to Western currencies? And so you have to imagine that that is something that they're thinking of. And if at any moment they could announce that and make that available, you would see a capital flight. You would see a shift like you've never seen before. So I think they know that. And again, I do believe they went too far with their sanctions, with their spanking of other nations. It's now come home to roost. And as a matter of fact, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you guys remember the classic book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I thought it was a very good read, and teaches you to think in terms of assets versus liabilities instead of just in terms of a job. So it was a very good book in that regard. And the author, Robert Kiyosaki, well, he has made some very stark predictions about the future of California. And this is just based mathematically on the decisions that they continue to make. The financial guru who correctively predicted the disastrous Lehman Brothers collapse in 2008 offered a dismal outlook of the future of California. And he is known for making hyperbolic predictions about the U.S. economy. And of course, California, according to him, is going broke. And California will begin raising taxes and cutting subsidies to the poor, to prisons, environmental problems, and teachers' unions. That means crime will spread as police will be cut. So there's the expectation that California is going to descend into greater and greater chaos. And I frankly have to agree. I do believe that they have overstepped. And when they're spending billions to solve the homeless problem, billions of dollars to do this, and of course, they just made it worse. Clearly, these are policies that they don't understand the actual impact in the real world. They have these ivory tower conversations and ivory tower policies, and when they get implemented in the real world, when they get implemented in the actual situation, they backfire. That tells you that there's a disconnect from reality. So they imagine the world going one way, like a script, and it has to go this way because that's what's on the script, but it doesn't. The world reacts the way the world reacts. People react the way people react, and they continue to miscalculate. So evil does tend to do that, overplay their hand, and I do believe that's what we continue to see. We're seeing the narrative continue to unfold, where they're making you very nervous about your food supply. So on top of all of the problems we already know there are in the food supply, on top of all of that, they're literally terrifying people about, they're putting fear everywhere. And here, I have never seen so many outbreaks and things reported in the news in such a short amount of time. And I've been watching this kind of thing for a long time. So this is very, very planned. There's so many updates. Here's a third person dies in Listeria outbreak tied to Boar's Head Deli Meats. And anybody that's bought deli meats in any of the major grocery stores knows that's a major brand that's there for people to buy deli meats and take them home. 3 people have now died in a Listeria food poisoning outbreak linked to Boar's Head Deli Meats. Federal food safety officials announced Thursday, and the overall number of people sickened rose to 43. So once again, we're seeing I believe the effects of decreasing quality control, and we're also seeing the effects of the curse. Frankly, no short way to say that. So the scripture is clear about the effects of the curse that would come upon the people of the land. And that is happening all over. Deuteronomy 28. Take a look for yourself. All right. You'll see for yourself. And we're seeing, again, things that shouldn't happen. We're seeing urgent recalls for fish now. Look at this. So urgent recall of fish products distributed to East Coast stores amid fears it could cause killer disease. So they continue to put narratives out there that get you nervous about your food supply. A Florida-based fish manufacturer has issued an urgent recall for products distributed to retailers across the East Coast amid fears of botulism, which is, wow, that's some serious, that's a serious disease. North Fish USA is recalling its imported 9-ounce packages of cold-smoked capelline after routine inspection by agricultural officials revealed the product may be contaminated. Well, it's a good thing somebody checked. What you got to wonder is how much is getting passed that's not getting checked. And that's also part of what's causing a disruption. And again, if people stop buying, that slows the processing of food down. That slows the system down. That means more food sits on shelves longer, which means it'll spoil, which means you're going to continue to have these problems. It's going to loop. And they knew it. There's no secret to this stuff. And the earth is manifesting all across the earth. We're seeing manifestations. This was an interesting story. We're so used to watching on our West Coast that we don't really look at some of the fires going on all across the earth. And this is also prophesied to come. And Greece's Marble Mountain burns in wildfires. This is just outside of Athens. So this thick gray smoke engulfed Mount Pentelicus that dominates Athens on Monday as the Greek capital battled the infernal fallout from what promises to be its hottest summer on record. So we're seeing the earth reactions and things going on across the earth that make us all pause. And I got to tell you, some of the fire damage, if you guys have been paying attention to the West Coast, we talked about it a lot, but we've got a fire finder, if you will, that's on remnantwatch.com. And these fires are devastating. I mean, they're talking huge amounts of land and huge amounts of property that are just absolutely devastated. And it takes a long time to recover that. So it's not like, oh, we put the fire out, so everything's good. No, you put the fire out and now it's all rebuild time. And that's the hope that you don't have the same problem again next year. So a lot is going on right now in the earth. And we're seeing of course, we just had the Hurricane Debbie, and that triggered a bunch of flooding and trapped people in homes and forced rescues all the way up into Pennsylvania. Our friends in New Jersey said they were getting 20 inches of rain, which is a ridiculous amount of rain. Fast rising floodwaters from Debbie's extreme rainfall has overwhelmed communities and fueled a dangerous situation in the Northeast, damaging homes, inundating roads, and forcing rescues. So the earth is responding. And some of this doesn't look natural to me, folks. I don't know about the rest of you. Love your comments down below. But I don't think it's I don't think that's natural to me. You know, that makes me wonder what's really going on. Speaking of not natural, one of the things that we talked about, and that really started in 2001. So again, one of those things which has me a little puzzled why it's suddenly becoming more a thing in the news. But they're talking about facial recognition now and more of the airport security issues and so forth. And this story came out that the airports will soon be able to automatically ID passengers using controversial new technology. And of course, people are now saying no government should be trusted. So facial recognition technology will soon be enabled at every security checkpoint inside Abu Dhabi's Zayed International Airport. So they're trying this out here in the United Arab Emirates to see if it's going to work and what the result will be. And of course, this data will then be used to sell the program elsewhere in the world. So they had to get it started somewhere. And once they show the, natural benefits, the increased security, of course, you're going to catch when you invade everyone's privacy. Sure, you're going to find some nefarious activity, but at what price? And so that is exactly the argument that has to be had in the public square. And there is a limit. There's a reason why we have a constitution in the United States and we have a Bill of Rights in the United States that should be robustly defended, because you can justify serious, egregious rights violations in the name of safety and security. And the scripture tells us that we'll say that the people will say peace and safety, and sudden destruction will come upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. Right. So that's what we use as a backdrop when we hear those things. They're trading security. Your security is going to be, or your rights are going to be traded for your security. And, you have to compromise some of that. And of course, that never stays in one spot. That always creeps. So pay attention to this stuff, folks. This is reality. This is the world we live in. And I don't know if you guys heard about this, but I start wondering about this kind of stuff, especially traveling recently. How easy is it to take a plane out of the sky? And there were 8 cancer doctors on this flight. 8 cancer doctors on this flight. I just found that interesting. Plane crashes in Brazil's Sao Paulo state, killing all 61 aboard, airlines say. A passenger plane crashed into a gated residential community in Brazil's Sao Paulo state on Friday, killing all 61 people aboard and leaving a smoldering wreck, officials and the airline said. And one thing that I did find really interesting, let's see if there's any pictures here. Well, there aren't on this particular article, but I did see some pictures of the wreckage. And I found that interesting because you actually saw wheels and wings. And, this is a plane crash that killed everybody on board, and you could still discern an actual plane. And, you could actually still see, parts of the plane on the ground, which makes me think of other plane where they said things were a plane crash, but there was no debris of any kind. Interesting, don't you think? I think so. And speaking of this tech stuff, I tell you what, this AI stuff is really getting beyond creepy. And now there's a new tool called Ask Cathy. Have you guys heard about this? The new Ask Cathy AI tool is being targeted toward Christians to ask their questions about God. But is this new tool dangerous? Ask Cathy centers on the Episcopal Church, which has become known for its left-leaning practices. Therefore, the answers someone might receive back from Cathy are fast and full of references, but not necessarily biblical truth. Wow. So now we have relegated the study to show yourself approved to just ask the AI. AI is taking the place of the fivefold. Look at that, folks. Don't need the fivefold anymore because we've got AI. We don't need apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers anymore. Don't need to move by the Ruach anymore because they got AI. Do you understand how blasphemous and how absolutely hideous that notion is? And it's right in front of everyone's face, and people aren't even reacting to it. And it's pure blasphemy. It is pure disrespect to the king and to those that he sent. Remember, he said, how they treat you is how they treat me. And so now they're making a push, part of what's going on along with this warfare effort, and they will use the war and warfare as a backdrop. Remember, they're always hunting high ground. And so they'll make fake news, if you will, the bad guy. They'll make anybody that doesn't toe the party line fake news. And now all they have to do is make fake news the enemy. Tech giants will be forced to ban fake news under labor plans. So they're trying to get this done in Europe. And again, whatever they do in one country can spread. So we have to always pay attention. Tech companies will be forced to ban fake news from their platforms under plans being considered by the government in the wake of the riots. And so they're using, see how they grab the high ground? The riots now became the justification. And after all, they have to protect the people. So therefore, the fake news now needs control, because that's the problem. Not the reason why the people were rioting. Oh, no. What's the problem is the fact that they had a communication mechanism that allowed them to organize and riot down the same street altogether. There's the problem. We need to fix that. Not fix the reason why they were rioting. Let's not do that. Let's just interfere with their ability to communicate with each other. So you're going to see more and more efforts to attack that. And you're going to see these kinds of articles, guys, coming out. And this is a subtle way of saying they're coming for you, because you are the ones who do not believe the party line. And the remnant, of course, are the strongest. So look at this. Children will be taught how to spot extremist content. Look at that, huh? Just as Messiah warned, brother would rise up against brother. And fake news online in a revamp of the curriculum following last week's riots. So they're going to use the riots for high ground. Schools will use lessons such as English, ICT, information and communication technology, and math to arm pupils against putrid conspiracy theories. You putrid conspiracy theories. Because who would think that bad people might get together and have a plan, which is what a conspiracy is. It's just laughable, folks, but this is what continues to manifest in our world. And what you see is more authoritarian efforts to control and use heavy-handed techniques to control, because when you free a people, they become ungovernable. A free people are ungovernable. So they need to do things of their own free will. They have to choose to do what's right. And even Elohim, look at them coming out of Egypt. Once they're free, they were difficult to deal with. Okay. And so this is part of what's happening with information and knowledge. People are getting free from control matrices, and it's backfiring hard. And even the earth is responding. Again, I continue to point this out because major earth systems are on track for collapse. And that word collapse, they sure love using that lately. The Atlantic Ocean sea currents, which bring warm water to Europe's collapses, making large swaths of its continent as cold as the Arctic Circle. In a grim turn, that's just a scenario that a team of European scientists are warning about in a new study in the Journal of Natural Communications. And this catastrophic collapse, along with the ruination of the Amazon rainforest and the melting of polar ice, is on track to actually happen if we continue on our current path. And I do believe that there are those that are actually trying to make these kinds of things happen so that they can sell their narrative. And so even though we may argue with us science, you can't argue the plan. And that they actually kick off. And then they use these preceded narratives as their preset high ground. And high ground is very important for money spending and for winning, elections and policy passing. You always have to have the high ground. Okay. So if you notice, they're always battling for who's got the higher ground in a matter. And when they lose the high ground, you'll see them disappear the story. When they can't hold the high ground, when too many eyes are on it, when too many people are figuring out what they're doing and they can't hold the high ground, that story disappears. It disappears and they try again with something else. So they're always looking for that. And now they're using AI for everything, folks. This is not only at Amazon, people get replaced. Like, it's not just boxes. Now they're using the robot dentist. Oops. Yep. So, nobody said anything when they were replacing Amazon workers, but how about when they're replacing dentists? How about when they replace all the jobs in when they had to have all this for their underground cities, guys. So they're trying it out with you. They're using you, all the people, as the guinea pigs, so they can go underground in their tunnels and live happily ever after. That's their plan. The Robo Dentist will see you now. An AI bot operates on a live human without supervision for the first time, and it's 8 times faster than a normal specialist. So there's the other thing. Okay? An AI-powered robot dentist has completed its first procedure on a live human. Wow. Brilliant. And why is that important? Because then they don't need doctors. Then they can go hide in their dens, in the clefts of the rock, and they don't need a doctor. And why not? Well, because they got AI. And so far, AI is proven to be almost, I think, as good as most doctors in diagnosing. And now if they can get medical procedures, I want you to think about that, where a computer is doing the medical procedure. Whew. Wow. I mean, think about what they're trying to do. And so this is where our world is headed. And yes, it does deal with accountability. What is the third leading cause of death in the United States? And I do believe may also be contributing to the top 2 that are above it, and that is medical malpractice. There's a lot of badly trained or poorly informed medical professionals who simply repeat what they were indoctrinated into and have not become the healers that they initially went out there to become. And so, and again, that's another area where we're seeing great awakening, right? So as people awaken and they realize, wait a minute, this is a problem, they get removed and new people come in who don't know anything, and they got to start all over again. And they've removed the people that have awakened. They removed the people that were going to be a problem. They tested everybody. Are you going to be a problem, or are you going to submit? And the ones that didn't submit, they got rid of them. And so what do we got left? Ooh, well, we got crazy left. Okay. And this is why we continue to see stories like this, which I can't tell you how much this upsets us, but we continue to shine light on this because we continue to encourage all of you to be very careful where you trust your children and who you allow your children to be around, especially educationally. And then we're not looking for these stories. They just keep coming out. Okay, they just keep coming out. Look at this. Another teacher is busted after allegedly having sex with a student 17 in her car. I'm going to jail today, aren't I? Yeah, you think? A married teacher in Australia has been charged with sexual intercourse with a child under her care after alleged having sex with a student in the back of her car. Tyler Braley, 30, was arrested in Lernea High School on Tuesday and charged with sexual intercourse with a child under her authority, sexually touching a child under authority, and aggravated sexual assault. What is going on? And how many times have we seen it be women? It's not always the men. So, so much for it always being the guys. And I don't pick these stories. It is both sides. And you know why? You want to know why it's both sides? Because it's a demon. That's why. And the demon doesn't care what victim it uses and what vessel it moves through. It's just trying to create more breaches and devastating effect and traumas that it can later live in. So it's creating strongholds in both people, not just one. Both of them are now destroying lives. They're destroying their lives. Everybody that's touched by or affected by the story is somehow contaminated. And this demon did a massive work. Now, everybody that hears this story is also affected by it, traumatized by it. This is exactly why these spirits are doing these things. This is why the remnant are so important in this hour. If there's ever been a time when we need people to be interceding, to be praying, and definitely be watching carefully over our young ones. They are the future. And I honestly don't know the logic behind putting them to the hazard in the way that we have done. And so I do believe that we all have an obligation to be a lot wiser about, the influences that we allow, especially around our youngest people, those who count on us for discernment. So when we say, yeah, no, that's okay, we are essentially endorsing things that we shouldn't endorse. One last story I wanted to mention, just talking about the earth responding and what have you. This just happened. There was another earthquake on the West Coast, a 4.4 magnitude earthquake rattled Los Angeles and beyond. So again, the ground continues to shake on the West Coast. We just heard about a earthquake there not too long ago. So this continues. I think it was up in the Barstow area, if I remember right, is where we saw that previous one. And now this one looks like it is centered a little closer to Los Angeles. So definitely some things rattling and shaking on the West Coast. If you are on the West Coast, well, we speak a better upon you that you would be safe wherever you are, and that Elohim would protect you and keep you, because I do believe it is becoming more dangerous in various parts of the earth. Actually, it is becoming more and more dangerous. And so it is more important than ever to seek first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness, to pray and ask him where you belong. And if you're in a place where he has declared a judgment, he may be moving you. Maybe that's why things are happening around you, to get you to ask that question and to begin to think about whether or not that's where you need to be. And so I want to encourage all of you. I see the day of the independent and even family only oriented people having no choice but to band together to survive. So the day of that independence has run its course. It is a failed strategy going forward, especially into the day of trouble. And so our encouragement to all of you is to find your fold, find other like-minded people who have the same heart as you do, and that you can walk together with, because after all, you will need one another before this is over. Remember that he came to build his assembly, his ecclesia, that the gates of hell would not prevail. Well, that's it for tonight. I pray that this has been a blessing to you, and I pray that our broadcast continues to be an encouragement and exhortation to all of you, so that you are informed without being overwhelmed. Well, that's our broadcast for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. May Elohim bring his Berakah upon each and every one of you. Good night.